Whether at home or work, life is about relationships. Welcome to Small Change, Big Dividends with your host, Branch Isole. Small Change, Big Dividends shares steps, tools, and tips for personal career and spiritual growth. So please welcome the host of Small Change, Big Dividends, Branch Isole.
How much power do you have? How much social influence do you possess? How much of your life do you control? Now, there are no right or wrong answers to these questions. They simply reflect individual stations in life and what, if anything, we're doing in ours. We have jobs, careers, responsibilities. We have duties and obligations. We have relationships, issues, problems, and fears. We have insecurities and doubts, and we have a conscience. So, what exactly do we have control over? Well, two things for sure: our thoughts and our responses. And today, we're looking at the powers that we do control. So, if you want to learn more, stay tuned. Coming to you from deep in the forest, near the banks of the Ouachita River, you're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. Small Changes, Big Dividend is a show where your questions are part of the program. So if you have a question, you can call during our live show to our toll-free number, 1-866-451-1451. Or you can email your question anytime during the week to my website, branchisole.com. Thanks for joining me again today. Each week, I share mana'o with listeners from around the world. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we talk about personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. Today, I'm going to share some small changes that can pay big dividends in your relationships and in your life. Because whether at home or work, life is about relationships. But it's healthy relationships that encourage and embrace growth. I recently read an article about 25 well-known individuals who overcame learning disabilities. Now, this is not easy because learning disabilities are one of the most stigmatizing doubts a person can have, live with, or overcome. Many who once grappled with insecurity are no longer held hostage by its doubts, fears, and most of all, the perceptions of others. They've learned how to develop strength of belief. You can too. They now believe themselves to be worthy of participation, worthy of competition, and worthy of victory. The question is why? Because no matter their station or situation, they now know themselves to be secure within. And they're no longer overly concerned or bothered by setbacks. Their energies are no longer attached to the perceptions of others. And this produces a steady stream of confidence. Now, they recognize that they won't win every time. But life being what it is, no matter what happens, they most likely will have another opportunity or another bite at the apple. So today we're talking about neutralizing the power of insecurity. You see, in every area of life or endeavor, sports, business, careers, industry, the key to long-term success is increasing your value by making yourself more and more indispensable. You may have heard stories of those who started at the bottom rung of their career and worked their way up the ladder to an elevated height of success. These people usually have three specific internal traits: attitude, fortitude, and patience, plus a grounded desire to learn and then apply their acquired skills. Take, for example, a baseball player or a card player. As long as they participate in a game, they know that they'll have another chance at bat or another hand of cards. Now, it's understood they won't get a hit or a winning hand every time. But with an awareness mindset, they can now approach each game knowing they have a chance to get a hit or winning cards with each at bat and every hand dealt. They can expect the possibility and the result of success without external pressure. So there's no reason not to risk being successful. After all, in baseball, an accumulated at bat success over 300 and up to 500 is considered highly productive and often a league leading performance. And that's only getting 3 to 5 hits out of 10. By eliminating pressures to succeed in someone else's eyes or for another's approval, you can start every day reaffirming, "Today I'll get 3 hits." You see, consistent winning begins with recognizing patterns that lead to accelerated achievement. And this is accomplished by honing skills that will produce success. So, how do we do this? How do we prepare for success every time? Well, first, we recognize patterns that lead to success, and then we sow seeds that build successful pattern reinforcement. Even though our batter may not get a hit every time he or she is at the plate, having learned the patterns of success reinforcement, there's a new awareness of opportunities for greater success within each effort. They start to understand which seed ideas work when watered and which don't. If you've observed successful people in any endeavor, they're often said to be in the zone. And when they're in this zone, they're seldom distracted from their focused task or goal. You probably know or recognize someone at the top of their field, their industry, or their business. And you probably also recognize they've invested time, energy, and effort to get there and to then stay at the top. You see, all potential success dwells deep in the psyche as worthiness acceptance, which is blunted by doubts rooted in insecurities. This is where the skirmish takes place between worthiness and doubt. And the more you have of one, the less you have of the other. So, how do we find, focus, and feed this sense of self-worth? And what about those struggling to understand this? What about those whose dreams have been cut short or altered by someone or something on their path? What about those in situations who can't afford the singular focus needed to do whatever it takes? And what about those with dreams attached to another's approval, another's love, or another's support, where fear of failure can be greater than the anticipated joy of success? When negative outcomes overwhelm or are perceived more powerful than the possibility of being successful. You see, the shadows of disappointment, past and present, can encroach memories that stifle or erode our paths to success. because fear of failure is often tied to how will I or my efforts be perceived, either by someone else or by the world at large. Recalling patterns of unfulfilled expectations can become an emotional Damocles sword, which is far and away different than I'll get 3 hits today. You see, the joy of participation, after all, is in getting the hits. So, how do we avoid feelings of inadequacy spawned by fear of failure? How do we start getting hits every time we're at bat? The challenge is to avoid feelings of inadequacy spawned by the fear of failure, and instead learn the power of triumph in our efforts. Why? Because effort reflects growth. Let me repeat that. The triumph of effort reflects growth. And growth's value is in increased production. You see, when growth is incremental or step by step, sustained success patterns can occur. Growth is available always in your future. It's waiting in the wings anytime, every time you go to bat, either at home or at work. Because every record ever broken took time, energy, and perseverance. When the reward of our response is up to the challenge and not perceived or anticipated as disappointment, we become stronger and more secure in our attitude and belief. We start to realize each challenge to our efforts is a testing ground for self-improvement, not leveraged by another's acceptance, love, adoration, or praise. Failure's condemnation loses its grip when our mirror's reflection says, I did my best and I will again. So don't be afraid to try. Don't be consumed by failure's possibility. A new attitude will allow you to stay in the game and continue taking your turns at bat. Do this by encouraging yourself to recognize patterns of success and then use those patterns again and again. As you succeed, you'll grow. And as you grow, old patterns will change or adapt. And you'll start to recognize how to know and use patterns that work for you consistently. And as your efforts bear fruit, insecurities will start to melt away. You see, worthiness will no longer be tied to someone else or something else. We're going to pause for our first commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the doors of success and the hinges that hang them. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole. I'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays 7 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave Media Network and TuneIn Radio. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to EasySense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's EasySense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, Radio show host and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. As I mentioned a moment ago, the doors of success hang by two hinges: insecurity and self-assurance. Both can spur accomplishments. However, one will keep you huddled in the corner, afraid of getting into the game. The other will keep you on task for as long as you are physically, mentally, and emotionally able, allowing you to succeed at the joy of living for as long as you choose. This one identifies opportunities that open doors of success. Let me ask you a question. Think about what you can change in the world. Not much, right? Now, think about what you can change in your world today. Think for a moment about what you can change right now in the interactions with your family, neighbors, co-workers. You see, life today is a complex set of interactions to try to get by, to try to get along, to try to get ahead by juggling people, circumstances, and emotions. You name it, we have an aspiration to have it, be it, or possess it. Because life in the 21st century can be challenging. For we're each here as a combination of mind, body, and spirit. But are yours working in concert? And how can you get them to work together? You see, we each came into this life as a spirit, occupying a soul, housed in a body, with a processing conscious mind. And every individual is on a quest to understand themselves and to be understood within their world, so that we might come to know ourselves and our place in this world. Now, from our first breath, we are caught up in the world because that's where we are. And we inhale its enveloping existence. And as life begins its journey, after day one, no one remains unimpaired. Because life is a series of chances, choices, and consequences to determine who we can, may, or will become. So how do we engage to have, keep, and grow our success? And where does all of this processing for our success take place? You see, God's love for each of us is so great that He designed our minds, our brains, with a unique ability. Our brain is like a supercomputer, and it can identify information literally at the speed of thought. Now, our minds can change, analyze, prepare, and respond to choices in milliseconds, faster even than we ourselves can understand. But here's the true genius of God's design. We can only focus on one thought at a time. Now think about that. Although the multiplicity of our brain's capabilities are innumerable, we can only actively focus on one thought at a time. This is the omniscience of God's all-knowing love. He knew our mind's processing capabilities would be great, but that we would constantly be imagining new wishes, new desires, and new actions. By combining our thought processing ability with free will. And he knew we would manage to get ourselves into situations, issues, and problems that we'd create literally without thinking. For this reason, he gave us the ability to focus only on a single active thought upon which to act in any singular moment. So, what does this mean? If you want to change your life, change your thoughts. Now, you may be asking, okay, Branch, how? By redirecting and replacing inappropriate or negative consequence thoughts with different options. Why? Because our thoughts become our actions, and our actions become our habits. Our habits become our character, and our character determines our destiny. If you want to change your life, start by changing your thoughts, and then act accordingly. You see, about age 2, we start to understand the concept of right and wrong. And we learn its consequences in the word no. As we grow, no becomes associated with reward and punishment. And as a result of early learned behavior, we start to see every situation, every choice, every decision as an option between right and wrong, experienced as reward or punishment. We begin to see every option or every opportunity as what's in it for me, a reward or punishment. And it's this mindset that keeps us focused on self in every situation that we face. The longer we embrace this all about me mindset, the more trapped we become. Because our thoughts become a constant pursuit for self. It becomes easy to dismiss or make excuses for the damage that we may inflict on ourselves or on others. And the world encourages us to embrace this path, even though we may find ourselves mired in stress, struggle, or conflict. We begin to think of right and wrong as benchmarks for our responses to the events, circumstances, and people in our daily life. And as long as we solely focus on right or wrong, the core of our intentions and our efforts will always remain focused on self. So, how do we get out of this cycle? Well, we must change our perception about this right or wrong, reward and punishment model. We can accomplish this with new responses and actions grounded in moral and ethical responses. But how do we know what moral and ethical responses are? Well, morals and ethics are expressions grounded in truth and love within God's essence, and they're available to us through free will. You see, for those who believe God is the creator of the universe and understand that He is spirit, then every living thing He created also has His spirit within it. And the closer we come to God, the more we begin to understand that His character and nature is truth and love. And truth and love in action are expressed as moral and ethical responses. When we begin to see truth in our life, we start to identify moral and or ethical options in every situation. And when we respond morally and ethically, the consequences of our choices begin to not only affect us, they benefit and affect our family, our neighborhood, and our community. You see, morals and ethics focus on what's best for us, not what's in it for me. No matter your life station, career, or personal situation, the only decision you need to make to change the entire trajectory of your life is to respond morally and ethically to the choices, decisions, and opportunities in your daily life. The day you start doing this, stress, struggle, pressure, and conflict will gradually start to be reduced. And any negativity that currently engages your choices, that keeps you trapped on this wheel of repetitive responses, will soon fade from your daily interactions. That concludes our second part. We're going to take our second commercial break. You're listening and watching Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and I'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends. I'm your host, Branch Isole. In war scenarios, there are untold numbers of casualties, both military and civilian, especially in high-density urban areas. We are currently witnessing in real time many lives being taken, many of whom were not expecting to take their last breath this week. Many who have little or no warning as to when their life may end. You see, the loss of life from war, famine, catastrophic storms, and general armed violence are now seen every day. So, what about making a spiritual relationship an important consideration in a world where death can come literally out of the blue? Here's the great thing about a spiritual relationship with God through Christ Jesus. The farther down the path we walk with Him, the closer we can become to Him, and the more we learn about His character and nature. The farther down that path we go, the more God provides for our belief and our spiritual obedience. And the more we walk with Christ, the more we become a child of God, just as He is. The longer and further we walk with Christ's Spirit active within us as our counselor, teacher, confidant, advocate, the more we begin to know, understand, and realize a spiritual relationship with God through Christ's spiritual advocacy is the blessing. You see, if we believe in our hearts and confess with our mouth that Jesus is the Christ, our eternal spiritual salvation is promised through His Word. I encourage you to consider starting or restarting this personal relationship with God going forward from today. On this week's prophecy segment, I want to share with you a well-known but nearly never talked about aspect of the current conflict in Gaza between Israeli and Palestinians led by Hamas. What we are witnessing in Gaza is one of God's prophetic end-time events described in Psalm 83. There's an Abrahamic link to this current and continued war. You see, since the beginning of humanity and for their biological predecessors, it was only natural that people and their descendants became aware of the powers of nature. And from the earliest of times, people attributed to these forces of nature different labels by which mythology took root and developed. A common identification of nature's power gave way to names that could be descriptively used to describe these powers as gods. So we had groups, tribes, and collections of people embrace mythology filled with powerful and purposeful gods, which were then passed down through the generations, both for education and life applications. As a result, people practiced polytheistic worship, belief in and worship of many gods. 4,000 years ago, out of the Middle East polytheistic world came a nomadic herdsman named Abram, who was living in southern Iraq. Now, Abram came to know God and abandoned the many gods of his day as he communed and grew in relationship with God as a monotheistic deity. As his spiritual awareness and connectivity to the Lord deepened, Abram's life was changed and materially blessed. God subsequently instructed Abram to leave Iraq and go to Canaan, a land that God told Abram his descendants would inherit for his continued faith and belief. This land, Canaan, eventually became known as Palestine. And as is the custom in the Middle East families, the firstborn son is always first in line to inherit his father's possessions. Now, Abram's wife, Sarai, couldn't have children, so she instructed her handmaiden, Hagar, to become pregnant with Abram so he would have a son to inherit his wealth. At that time, nomadic herdsmen like Abram were known as Hebrews. And while Abram and Sarai were Hebrews, Hagar, the handmaiden, was Egyptian. During Hagar's pregnancy, Sarai became jealous and started to mistreat her, so Hagar ran away. But while she was in the desert, an angel appeared and told Hagar to return home, because the Lord would make her son the father of a great people. Hagar did so and gave birth to a son named Ishmael. Abram now had a son to pass on his wealth, possessions, and inheritance. However, years later, Abram would have an encounter with the heavenly messenger who explained that God's plan for Abram and Sarai included a covenant by which Abram and Sarai would have new names. They would now be called Abraham and Sarah. Well, Sarah soon gave birth to a son named Isaac. And after Isaac was born, both Sarah became jealous because Ishmael, the firstborn, would inherit everything. So she convinced Abraham to exile Hagar and Ishmael from the camp. Now, Ishmael had been the apple of Abraham's eye, but he did as Sarah requested, banishing Hagar and Ishmael. And as Hagar and Ishmael again languished in the desert, an angel of the Lord again came to rescue them. Ishmael would go on to have 12 sons, who would each become a patriarch within the Arab world. With Hagar and Ishmael gone, Abraham's full attention was on Isaac. Isaac would then have 2 sons, Esau and Jacob. Now, Esau and Jacob were twins, but Esau was born first, so he would be claimant to Isaac's wealth through inheritance. However, years later, Esau would give away his birthright to his brother Jacob. And Jacob became the presumptive head of household and inheritor of Abraham's wealth. Like Abraham and Isaac before him, Jacob also had an encounter with God, where God told Jacob his new name would now be Israel, and that through him a great nation would be born. It came to pass that Israel had 12 sons, just like Ishmael. So, every Israeli and Arab descendant battling today and in conflict with each other for the last 4,000 years trace their ancestral linkage back to Abraham as patriarch of their family or clan. The Jews, you see, have an ancestral link that goes back to Abraham through Jacob and Isaac, while many in the Arab world have that same ancestral link going back to Abraham through Ishmael. So the many Jews and Arabs today battling in the Middle East, who are descendants of these 2 stepbrothers, Ishmael and Isaac, both had Abraham as their hereditary biological father. The land God promised he would give to Abraham went from the Wadi River in Egypt to the Euphrates River in Iraq, and included all of the land of Canaan, where the Canaanites and later Palestinians lived. So if you watch the news today, you'll see on the maps of Gaza that the Wadi is the dividing line between Gaza's north and southern section. The land of Canaan became Palestine, and in May 1948, Palestine became Israel. Think of it this way. Whatever state or region you live in now, if your ancestors lived and occupied that era since antiquity, regardless of its label, you would probably consider it your homeland. Arabs living in Canaan were Canaanites, both when Abraham arrived, as well as when his Hebrew descendants left Canaan for Egypt. The Canaanites were still there. And even though the land would later become known Palestine, descendants of Canaan and then Palestine to this day consider the land to be theirs. Now the Jews claim this land as theirs, bequeathed to them through their patriarch Abraham 4,000 years ago by God. The land of Palestine was given to the Jews and renamed Israel in a single day on May 14th, 1948, through the politics created by the United Nations. So between the birthright questions, the lineage inheritance beliefs, and claims of the land promised to the Jews, yet occupied as a Palestinian homeland, what we are witnessing today in the news, we are witnessing a Middle East struggle that's been going on for 4,000 years, as both Israelis and Palestinians claim this ancestral ownership of the same land. Hopefully, this background gives you a little bit more information, clarity of some of the behind the scenes things that are not mentioned in the news. We're going to take our final break for the day. You're watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. I'm your host, Branch Isole, and I'll be right back.
Did you know that your beliefs create your entire reality, but it's the subconscious beliefs that do most of the creating? Belief shifter and life coach Shiraz can help you identify those limiting beliefs and eliminate them, often in a single session.
Like it was almost instant, like I had relief right away.
Creating better health, relationships, careers, and finances. Let Shiraz help you step out of safety and into awareness.
Definitely something's happening. It's like a flow inside. It feels good.
Whether in person or online, Shiraz provides personal coaching, belief shifting. Visit Shiraz at energeticmagic.com or call 416-529-7429. Energetic Magic on the BBM Global Network, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern. Find your greater happiness. Be well. Be aware. Be magical.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of The Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on The Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back. Thanks for joining me today. On Small Changes, Big Dividends, we discuss personal, career, and spiritual Christianity essentials for growth-filled living. If you know someone who could benefit from today's episode, please share it with them. If today's show has been interesting for you, please give it a rating and review. And to know more about my work, I invite you to visit my website, branchisole.com, or my YouTube channel, Branch Isole. Today's show has been sponsored by Crystal Creek Farm. If you have a business, a product, or a service you'd like to share with the world on Small Changes, Big Dividends, send your inquiry to the website. You've been watching and listening to Small Changes, Big Dividends on the Bold Brave Media TV and Talk Global Network. Until next week, keep growing and be in the world, not of the world.
This has been Small Change, Big Dividends. When you're ready for healthier, more successful relationships at home or work, Small Change, Big Dividends is your show. Wednesdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.